Now we're going to look at filters. Now, filters in Photoshop allow you to create a variety of different special effects that you can apply to images or use to create interesting backgrounds, etc. Filters can be applied to image layers, masks, channels, smart objects, shape layers, and even type layers. You can apply filters to a variety of objects in Photoshop. Filters can be run on image layers, masks, channels, smart objects, smart layers, and type. Now, some of these may require that you convert them to smart objects or rasterize them first. Filters are applied to active, visible layers or selections. They cannot be applied to bitmap mode or indexed color images, and some filters only work on RGB images. However, all filters can be applied to 8-bit images, and there are limited filters available for the 16-bit and 32-bit images. Some filters are processed entirely using RAM memory, so if you don't have enough available RAM to process a filter effect, you may get an error message. We've been looking at filters. We've done sharpening, we've done blur, we've done a variety of things using our filter menu, so this isn't new to us. I'm going to duplicate my image layer here, and now we'll go to our filter menu. Now, if I want to do a smart filter, what I can do is I can select Convert for Smart Filters right here, and it gives me this little warning box letting me know that re-editable smart filters is going to require that my image be converted to a smart object. So I'm going to say OK, and we see that I've got a smart object over here. Now, I could have gone over here to Layer, Smart Object, and Convert to Smart Object and converted my image first and then gone to do the layer and then gone over to run my filter, but they've made it very convenient by placing that under the filter menu for us as well. Now, under filter, let's take a look at the filter gallery, and this is zoomed in at 100%. Let's zoom our image out so we can see the various filters and what they would look like. Filters are broken up into these categories: artistic, brush strokes, distort, sketch, stylize, and texture. And if you look at the drop down menu, then you can see a preview of what the filter would look like on your image. Now, filters are one of those things in Photoshop that you can get some really neat effects. So one thing that's important to point out is filters are another area in Photoshop that just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just like when you're doing layer styles, you pick one or two things. In a filter, a little bit goes a long way. So make sure that when you are going through and applying filters to keep the end goal in mind. Now, for each of the filters here that you can select, you'll see you'll have sliders and etc. that you can go through and make multiple selections to customize the filter over here on the right. Now, I've gone through several of the artistic filters as I've been talking. Below that, you'll see there's brush strokes. Below that, distort. Below that, sketch. Then we have our stylize filter here with our glowing edges, kind of a neon effect. Then we have our texture filters. And again, you can do filters at a reduced opacity and get some neat looking effects. So filters aren't all bad. It's just better to know when to stop when using them. Alright, so I'm going to cancel out of this because I don't want to apply any of these filters. And you can apply multiple filters. Let's say I've got my crackler, stylize, or texture filter applied. Now I can just click. I can do it again, or I can go up here and then select maybe a different filter. And so now you see I've got spatter and crackler filters applied. To remove one of them, all I have to do is select the filter that I want to remove and then select the trash can to delete the selected filter. Alright, I'm going to cancel out of that. Before smart filters were added to Photoshop in around CS3, in order to apply multiple filters or to be able to reduce the effect of a filter, you would have to duplicate your image layer, and then you would run your filter, and then you would create a mask, and then you would go in and reduce the opacity or paint out the areas that you wanted to use. Now with smart filters, as long as you're working on a smart object, you can go in and apply a filter, and we'll go here to, let's apply a field blur. Okay, and so you can see that I can apply field blur, just adjusting the center, how much blur I want. And when I'm through, I can go over here, I can add blur or remove blur with my slider. I can key in the amount of blur I want here. In the box up here at the upper right hand corner, I can turn my preview on and off. And when I'm finished, if you look up here in the options bar, I can either cancel out, toggle preview on and off, click OK. So I'll say OK. And we see that the blur is applied to the entire image. However, look in your layer panel and we'll see the smart filter listed. And now beside smart filter, we see that we have a mask that's automatically created. And below that, we have my blur gallery. So it's showing that I created a blur. Now I can select my mask, grab a brush, and I want maybe the trees to be out of focus, but let's say I want her to be in focus. So using a black brush in my mask, you can see that I'm able to adjust, and if this was an image that was actually shot, we would know that right here by her would be a little more in focus. However, it would go out of focus the further it gets away from her. And so go ahead and paint her into focus here using the mask and a black brush. I can go in and I can clean up any areas that I feel maybe I want to be masked, blurred. I don't want to appear as if I did this in Photoshop. So going back and forth. An easier way is obviously to do a selection and then paint out the selection. So if I wanted to do that in my mask, I could just go ahead, do a quick selection here. Hairs. Alright. And then using my black brush, if I go over the edges, it doesn't matter. I can make sure that I'm getting a nice clean edge. And if I need to adjust, like we can see right here on her arm, then I can just adjust my selection, re-grab my brush, and take care of any issues like that. Command or Control D to deselect. Now, if you're taking a picture and you're getting depth of field blur, it doesn't just drop off and blur. Not unless you're using just a really, really narrow depth of field or aperture. So what you would do is you would reduce the opacity of your black brush so that as you are painting in your mask, the blur happens gradually. And so what you see over here is I can paint at a reduced opacity of black and white on my background to give a gradual blur. Now this tree right here should all be in focus, so that should be maybe not at 100 because it's a little behind her maybe, but those are the types of details that you're going to have to pay attention to if you're trying to make a believable depth of field blur. And then you would have to go in with a small brush and blur out right here in between. Now if I want to add another blur to this smart object, I just go up here to Filter, come down here, maybe I'm going to now choose to sharpen. Maybe I'm through with the image, I'm going to sharpen it now. You see my Sharpen Filter is added under the smart filters here, and I can individually turn on or off my sharpening. I can edit it just by clicking over here. It brings up my sharpen window. I can go in and then make my adjustments. I'm going to cancel out of that. And that is how you go about using smart filters. Now the next filter that I wanted to review with you is the Camera Raw filter. Now Camera Raw we've looked at multiple times, and even if you didn't take a picture in Adobe Camera Raw or in RAW format, you can go in and edit images using the Adobe Camera Raw filter. So you select this, but first what you would want to do is you're going to want to duplicate your image layer because it will not put this filter on its own layer. So you can do one of two things. You can make it a smart filter. You can come up here and convert your object to a smart object, and then you can go in and select Filter, Camera Raw filter. And again, in Camera Raw, this is where you would want to go to make adjustments on exposure. You can go in and make your lens adjustments for any distortion that may have happened when the image was taken. You can apply contrast, clarity. Maybe since this is not a picture of people, you might want to boost the saturation a bit. And up here in the histogram, you can actually drag your histogram and adjust the highlights, whites, shadows, blacks, all from within the histogram. If I drag my histogram one way or the other, and I can lift it up or down, it's just moving my sliders around down here. Alright, I'm going to reset Camera Raw defaults, and then maybe boost the contrast just a bit, maybe the clarity and saturation. Click OK. And we see that that Camera Raw filter is down below my smart object here. If you want to do lens corrections without opening it in Camera Raw, you could always go and select lens correction. And this will allow you to go in and customly, if you want to do auto corrections, then you can go in and select all of the camera makes, etc. I don't have the information on this image since I didn't take it. It's from unsplash.com. So what I would be doing is I would go into custom, and I can then adjust the bloat, fringe, add a vignette, adjust the midpoint maybe a little bit. You can tilt the perspective one way or another. All of that from right here. Essentially the same thing you've got in Adobe Camera Raw. Cancel out of that. And the next filter that I want to look at is the Liquify filter. Now, Liquify is best used on selections. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to select what you want to apply the Liquify filter to prior to going into the Liquify filter, because it is very memory intensive and will freeze up or slow down your computer quite a bit if you don't first make a selection. So let's say I want to adjust my boat here. I've got it selected. I am on a smart object layer. I'm going to go to filter, and I'm going to come down and select Liquify. And when my Liquify window opens, you'll see that a mask is placed over the rest of the image. And the only thing that I really have available to me is the boat. Now, over here to the left, you'll see I have several different tools available to me within Liquify. The top one is the Forward Warp tool. The shortcut is W, and that allows you to pull in and warp areas of the selection. Now let's say what you're doing is not what you wanted, you don't like the effect, then next down is the Reconstruct tool. You select that, and these are all brushes for cursors. So the Reconstruct tool, I can just come in and I can paint over the areas that I don't like, and it reconstructs back to the original. Now sometimes if you've done extensive things like what I had done, it's easier to just cancel out. I still have my selection. I can select filter and liquify again, and I don't have to worry about if I missed something in my reconstruction. Now the next tool is the smooth tool, and sometimes when you've done a large area, it can make it appear jagged along the edges. And the smooth tool allows you to go in and smooth out those edges and make it look a little more natural. And so you just drag along the edge of your edit, and the smooth tool helps you to adjust. I'm going to reconstruct again. Just that one little area makes it easy. And the little white that you're seeing right here is just actually part of the selection. It's not where anything's been moved, it's the water. So part of those pixels were selected before our mask was created. Now next down here, we have the Twirl Clockwise tool. Pretty self-explanatory, but what you can see is when I click and hold down, it begins to twirl the area in which the cursor is over. Reconstruct that again. Now below that are the two areas that you tend to use a little more. Pucker and bloat. Now pucker is going to sink in the middle, and you've seen this a little bit before when we did retouching. You did pinch. Well, this is essentially the same thing, but using Liquify. Sucking in. On a person, you would maybe do this on their stomach, on a double chin, etc. Be careful you don't go too far, and you will get these weird lines that you're going to have to retouch after the fact, just like you did with the pinch tool. Bloat is used on areas that you want to make appear larger. So on gentlemen's muscles, etc. Sometimes it's used on fruit if you're doing commercial photography to make things look plumper, and those areas. Now below the pucker and bloat tool, you have the push left tool. And so if you are retouching someone's stomach and they're facing to the right, you can push the left and give them a little tummy tuck. Below that, freeze mask. That's just painting in the mask. If there's an area that you don't want to be affected when you pucker or bloat, you can go in and add to your mask using the freeze mask. And so if you wanted to make an adjustment only right here in the middle, but you didn't want it to apply to this area here, you could paint in a freeze mask. Now go in with your bloat tool. It will only apply to the unmasked areas. Now you can erase your freeze mask using the thaw mask tool. So once you're through, you can go in and you can adjust your mask using the thaw mask tool. Below that is the hand tool, which you should be familiar with at this point, and then we have our zoom. And you can click to zoom in or Alt or Option click to zoom out. Now those are the tools. Over to the right, you can see where you have a lot of different options and sliders that you can play with. You're not going to have to do anything with Liquify for an assignment, and so you can load a mesh if you had a pre-selected selection or something you wanted to load in. You're able to use that here. You can select Reconstruct. If you want to reconstruct your image, you can do so here and cancel. Or you can select Restore All, and that cancels out all of the changes you've made and allows you to start from scratch as well. I'm going to cancel out of that. And next, I want to look at another blur filter. And so we're going to select the Veggies image here. I'm going to duplicate my background layer, and I'm going to go to Filter and convert for a Smart Filter. Select OK. And then I'm going to come down to Blur Gallery, and we're going to use the new Spin Blur. And as you can see, Spin Blur applies a motion effect and a radial pattern over the image. And you can click on the edges here when you get a double arrow to adjust the size or the radius of your blur. You can pull in if you want on these points here to bring the blur all the way out to the edge, or if you want it to be more gradual. And you can adjust the size or speed of the motion blur by dragging here in the center, or over to the right in the panel, you can drag on the slider. You can adjust the placement of the center of the blur by clicking and dragging at the middle selection point. Now, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense maybe for a bowl of vegetables, but you can see over here, I'm going to cancel out of that and select the van. If we duplicate our image, convert it to a smart object, and then go in and apply a spin blur, which I can move over here, resize over my tire. I can just click over here and it'll add another of the same filter, resize it, there we go. And then if I wanted to add some path blur, I could take and adjust, and we can create motion blur using the path. So you can add multiple blur effects here. Now, if I click OK, we can see I've got all of these blurs in one blur smart filter. So if I select that, I can go in and I can paint out in the mask the areas that perhaps I don't want to be blurred. I want to make sure I take this spin blur off above the tire over here. And so you'll want to go in and make accurate masks to make that look correct as well. Another way that you might make this look a little more believable would actually be to create the two blurs on separate layers so that you could mask them out individually. But you can see where that makes it look as if you captured this van going down the road rather than sitting stationary. Now I'm going to come back to my girl in the woods here, and I'm going to turn off the layer that we had done the blur effect on previously and come back down to my original image and duplicate that one, because I want to show you some of the render and lighting filter effects that you can do. And so we're going to go up to the filter menu, convert for a smart filter, select OK. And as you can see, if you go to a filter menu, if there's a filter that does not work on your image, it will be blurred out. And so lens blur does not work on smart objects, and so it's grayed out here. And so if you go through the different filters and one isn't available for your file type, then when you go to that filter, it's going to show grayed out. So lens blur is not available for smart objects, and it's grayed out here. However, I want to come down to render, and you can see flame, picture frame, and tree not available for a smart object. However, lighting effects, lens flare, fibers, difference clouds, and clouds are. So I'm going to select lighting effects, and you can see that it has darkened my image, and I can relight the image using various lighting filters. Over to the right, there's a point light that can be used, so you could just add a point light, and then you can click to expand the brightness. You can click and drag to expand the radius and reach of the light. That's point light. Now spotlight, you can adjust the angle, you can move it, you can adjust the width, the reach, the size, everything. There's sliders over here to the right. You can adjust the color of the light. And then infinite is a lot more versatile as far as you're adjusting maybe where the light source is coming from. So let's say you had a picture that had some lamp posts in it and they weren't lit and you wanted to light them. Then you could light them using the point light. Infinite lighting is more for an entire image. Now I can come back in here and I can adjust my angle. I can adjust my brightness and everything. So the color, brightness, how much gloss, everything can be adjusted individually over here as well. And that is just a brief overview of the render filter. I'm going to cancel out of that. And the last thing we're going to discuss is actually, if you go to your filter menu, you can come down, you can see some plugins that I've installed here, which are essentially different filters that I've purchased and installed on my machine. You can see the Anthropics plugin is not available for this image because it's a smart object. However, my Nick collection filters are available. And you can go to Browse Filters online, and that will take you to the Adobe website here. And what you have here are several filters and plugins that can be purchased and installed on your machine within Photoshop. Some are free, some of them go almost to $500. So you can get a lot of different options from this add-on site. There are also a lot of different photographers and designers and different filters and plugins available online as well. Now these get loaded into the actual Photoshop software plugins file on your hard drive. For Chapter 15, you have a worksheet that details the assignments. You'll be placing those in a Chapter 15 folder and turning those in